Welcome back to Bedtime History 9 p.m., where calm history stories each night help you unwind and drift to sleep. Tonight we follow a road, but not just any road. Picture yourself standing under a sun so white it seems to hum. The air shimmers over a long ribbon of stone, cutting straight through rolling hills. You squint, tracing the line until it melts into the horizon. This path isn't new. It's been there for nearly 2,000 years. And somehow, against earthquakes, floods, and the occasional barbarian parade, it still works. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I love reading your comments, so tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease in to tonight's journey together. You stand on a Roman road, cool stones pressing against your sandals, the smell of dust and olive leaves drifting in the wind. Beneath you lies the skeleton of an empire. These roads weren't just shortcuts, they were arteries, pumping soldiers, merchants, and ideas between the heart of Rome and her farthest fingertips. You can almost hear them, the iron rhythm of marching feet, the clatter of mule carts, the muttered Latin commands echoing down a line that stretches from the Alps to the desert. The Romans called their roads viae, meaning ways. Simple enough. But in truth, they were monuments disguised as infrastructure. Each mile was a boast. Rome was here. It didn't matter whether the soil was swamp or mountain. The engineers would flatten, drain, carve, or bridge it. To them, geography was merely an obstacle waiting for obedience. Under the Republic and later the Empire, roads became the silent force behind expansion. While emperors made speeches about glory, it was these gravel veins that kept the machine alive. You might imagine Caesar charging into Gaul with shining armor and divine purpose, but he moved at the mercy of his roads, the same paths his engineers had surveyed long before a single sword was drawn. There's a strange comfort in that, isn't it? Empires rise on logistics, not charisma. If you can move troops, food, and gossip efficiently, you can rule the world. The Romans seemed to know this instinctively. Every new conquest came with an order to start paving. The first great road, the Via Appia, began in 312 BCE. Picture Appius Claudius Caecus, a man who probably never slept well again after seeing the budget, declaring, "We'll build it anyway." And they did, from Rome to Capua, then later to Brindisi, nearly 350 miles of precise, hard-packed layers that even modern asphalt struggles to beat. The stones were laid so tightly that water slid off them like oil on glass. Travelers wrote about it centuries later, marveling that their wheels didn't sink even in rain. Now imagine standing beside one of those builders. His tunic clings with sweat, his back bowed under the sun. Each stone is wrestled into place by hand, with measured care, as if he's building something sacred, because to him, he is. Roads were religious undertakings. The first stone was laid with ceremony, the final milestone with offerings to Mercury, the god of travelers. The road was not merely a means to an end, it was the empire itself, stretched thin and humming with divine order. But here's the quirky part. No one could agree who truly owned them. Were they imperial property, provincial responsibility, local maintenance? Records show endless arguments, governors accusing towns of neglect, towns blaming soldiers, soldiers blaming weather. Bureaucracy, it seems, is more immortal than marble. Historians still debate exactly how much of Rome's road network was strategic versus economic. Some argue they were purely military tools, optimized for legions to reach rebellions fast. Others point to the evidence of trade stations, inns, and milestones that suggest a deeper civic purpose to make Rome feel closer, even when it wasn't. Either way, the result was the same. Within a few generations, the known world had a pulse, and you could follow it, one steady step at a time. You glance down again. The stones beneath your feet are uneven, but unbroken, their edges softened by centuries of sandals, hooves, and tires. You could walk from here to Naples, or even to Istanbul, tracing the bones of a civilization that refused to vanish. And as you take your first step down that ancient line, you realize something oddly comforting. The Romans didn't build roads for their time. They built them for all time. Maybe even for you.
The first few steps on a Roman road feel deceptive, smooth, easy, civilized. But pause, crouch, and look closer, and you'll see it's not a road so much as a geological sandwich built by obsession. Beneath that calm stone surface hides a masterpiece of layers, logic, and sweat, the kind that could only come from people who thought in centuries, not seasons. You see, the Romans didn't just lay rocks and hope for the best. They engineered permanence. First came the groma, a strange little device that looked like a cross made of sticks, dangling plumb lines. With it, surveyors, often army veterans who'd seen enough mud to respect solid ground, laid out perfectly straight lines. How straight? Some Roman roads deviate less than a meter over 10 miles. That's accuracy that would make a modern GPS blush. Picture them, teams of surveyors standing in the heat, sighting down their lines through smoky air. One holds a staff tipped with bronze, another shouts measurements, a scribe scratches wax tablets with trembling fingers. You can almost smell the pitch of fresh-cut wood and sweat-soaked linen. They'd marked the route with white stones, tiny breadcrumbs of empire, stretching across valleys and over rivers. Then came the digging. Workers carved a trench, deep enough to outlast frost, flood, and human folly, sometimes more than a meter down. Into it went layers, first sand or crushed stone for drainage, then gravel, then slabs of basalt or limestone cut so cleanly they could lock together without mortar. The surface was convex, slightly arched to shed rain, like a spine designed to shrug off centuries. It's easy to forget that this system, called the Via Strata, is where we get the word street. 1,000 cities still whisper Latin every time they name a road. And there's the sound, rhythmic thuds of iron hammers, the scrape of chisels, men cursing in provincial Latin accents. It wasn't elegant work, it was relentless. Legionaries doubled as laborers, and when they weren't fighting, they were digging. A Roman soldier carried not just his sword and shield, but a dolabra, a heavy, two-headed digging tool, half pickaxe, half shovel. Roads were military operations executed with the precision of battle. One curious detail, Roman roads weren't uniform. Each province adapted its materials. In Britain, they used flint and local limestone. In North Africa, sandstone and crushed pottery. In Syria, black volcanic basalt. You could almost tell where you were in the empire just by the color of the stones beneath your feet, a kind of geological passport stamped with empire's reach. And yet they all shared one goal: endurance. That's why when you drive today along the Appian Way or the Via Augusta in Spain, you're not just following ancient routes, you're literally riding the same bones, sometimes the same stones. Modern asphalt has been poured over Roman layers, but dig down a few feet, and there they are, still draining rainwater just as they did under Caesar. Of course, not everything about their precision was practical. Roman engineers were notoriously stubborn about straight lines. If a hill stood in the way, they'd carve through it. If a marsh blocked the path, they'd drain it. The idea of curving gently around an obstacle? Barbaric. The road had to be straight because order itself demanded it. A crooked road, one engineer supposedly said, is a crooked mind. You can almost hear his foreman muttering, "Tell that to my back." Modern scholars still debate how they achieved such uniform alignment without modern instruments. Some think they used raised sighting platforms or fire beacons at night to maintain direction. Others believe they just had an uncanny eye for geometry, honed through temple design and aqueduct construction. Whatever the truth, you can't help but admire the stubbornness. Imagine an engineer today suggesting bulldozing a mountain for aesthetic consistency. HR would faint. There's also something philosophical hiding in that geometry. To a Roman, a straight road wasn't just efficient, it was moral. It reflected discipline, predictability, dominion over chaos. The line between 2 points wasn't just the shortest distance, it was civilization itself, drawn in stone. You step onto that surface again, feeling the faint rise and fall beneath your feet, the camber, the slope, the careful drainage channels on each side. Somewhere, water trickles faintly through a ditch that's been doing its job for 2 millennia. You imagine the engineers nodding with satisfaction. Still drains? Told you so. But not everything was perfect. Some stretches buckled under frost or quakes. Others vanished under cities. Some became rivers themselves, sunken and forgotten. Even so, the core survived. Roman durability was less about invincibility and more about redundancy. Every layer did a job, every stone leaned on its neighbor. There's a lesson there, whispered softly under your feet. Longevity isn't about strength alone, it's about cooperation, a concept as true for empires as for engineering. The sun sinks lower, turning the stones amber and gold. You follow the faint echo of sandals and hooves down the ancient line, wondering who first realized this, that a road isn't just a route through space, but
but through time itself.
The farther you walk, the more you realize something curious. The road doesn't just exist, it's alive. Every groove and crack carries a memory. And at the heart of that memory is not marble senators or silvered emperors, but the men who built it. Soldiers with dust in their teeth and calluses harder than stone. You hear them before you see them, the scrape of iron on gravel, the creak of leather harnesses, the short clipped commands echoing in Latin. Cave pedem, keep your footing. These are legionaries, the Empire's tireless machine. You might have expected swords glinting in the sun, but instead you find shovels, picks, and wheeled carts full of crushed rock. For all their reputation as conquerors, Roman soldiers spent nearly as much time building as they did bleeding. Roads were their most underrated battlefield. Every spadeful of earth meant another day the empire advanced, not with glory, but with geometry. To the Romans, infrastructure was warfare, fought with shovels instead of spears. You pause beside a centurion, his bronze helmet polished to a dull gleam, giving orders as his men dig trenches along a marked line. Each legion was expected to build not only camps and fortifications, but roads that would outlast them. One historian even joked that the Roman army conquered half the world because it couldn't stop paving it. A soldier's toolkit included the delabra, that heavy pickaxe-spade combo, perfect for hacking through roots or prying rocks loose. Another carried a lurum, a leather lash used for measuring and aligning. They worked in silence, except for the rhythmic grunt of effort. By evening, sweat had soaked their tunics, and the road stretched another 50 meters, rough but solid, a promise taking shape. The discipline was astonishing. When an emperor ordered a new road, say to connect Rome to the northern frontier, legions would carve across hundreds of miles of hostile territory, felling trees, draining swamps, and cutting through cliffs. Each milestone marked not just distance, but endurance. It's hard not to admire their pragmatism. For instance, roads doubled as instant military supply lines. A messenger on horseback could gallop from Gaul to Rome in about 8 days, faster than some medieval kings could cross their own capitals. Armies could redeploy with terrifying efficiency. The empire didn't just build roads for trade, it built them to move war around. But here's a curious twist. The same soldiers who built the roads later used them to rebel. When an emperor fell out of favor, legions would march along these very routes back to Rome, neat, disciplined lines of mutiny. The empire had unintentionally built its own shortcuts for revolution. Modern archaeologists have uncovered roads flanked by temporary military camps, some only used once, others turned into permanent settlements. The line between engineer and soldier blurred. You can almost imagine the conversations at campfire. One man boasting about his masonry skills, while another sharpens his sword, both equally proud, equally exhausted. And of course, there's the humor. Ancient graffiti found on a construction site near Pompeii reads, "We built this faster than the gods blinked." Nearby, another scroll says, "Supervisor sleeps more than he works." Turns out, workplace sarcasm is older than most religions.
Still, their craft bordered on divine precision. Roads were built in stages, each squad responsible for a layer, checked and rechecked. Some historians suggest the Legion's order mirrored road construction itself, layers of discipline, stone upon stone, creating something unyielding. Even the milestones carried meaning. Each was inscribed with the emperor's name, the distance to Rome, and sometimes a small boast. Under Augustus, the world is connected. You could say the empire invented branding. Every journey, a reminder of who paved the way. There's an ongoing scholarly debate about whether Rome's military roads were as standardized as later maps suggest. Some evidence points to regional improvisation, soldiers using whatever materials they had. Others insist the methods were centrally designed, proof of a bureaucratic mind that couldn't tolerate variation. The truth, as usual, lies in the cracks. Enough uniformity to feel imperial, enough local flair to stay human. You can feel that humanity under your feet. The fingerprints of soldiers pressed into mortar, the faint tool marks on a stone slab, the rhythm of labor echoing through centuries. Every road began as sweat and ended as permanence. Night falls now, and the road cools beneath your soles. A few torches flicker along the trench line, their light glinting off bronze helmets and wet stone. The soldiers hum a work song in low tones, deep as thunder. You stand quietly, realizing that their roads didn't just connect cities, they connected lifetimes. Every empire falls, but these men left something that refused to. Their roads became the memory of their existence, unyielding proof that once thousands of men with simple tools believed they could outlast time, and somehow they did.
Dawn creeps back across the stones, brushing gold over the edges where last night's dew still clings. The road no longer feels like a monument to labor. It hums with motion. You're not alone anymore. Ahead, a caravan rattles to life. Oxen straining against carts, mules stamping their hooves, merchants shouting half-Latin bargains that blur into the morning air. Welcome to the living arteries of Rome, the empire's bloodstream, where everything and everyone moved. You step aside to let a creaking wagon roll past. Its wheels bite the gravel, tossing dust into a baker's cloak. Behind it, a pair of couriers thunder by on horseback, their faces masked with urgency. Each rider wears a bronze medallion marked Cursus Publicus, Rome's official postal service. Messages could race from Britain to the Danube in less than a week, changing governors, saving wars, starting others. Think of it, a world before telegraphs, yet every frontier still pulsed with news from the capital. The road isn't just stone, it's communication. Every milestone whispers distances, every traveler carries rumors. An innkeeper in Gaul could tell you which emperor just died because a courier passed by the day before, muttering it over a bowl of stew. The whole empire was, in a sense, a single conversation carved into stone. Traders followed close behind. You smell the cargo before you see it: olive oil, fresh fish preserved in salt, leather dyed crimson, amphorae clinking like glass bells. From the eastern deserts came spices and silks. From the north, iron and amber. Roads were the veins of commerce,
feeding the appetite of Rome's endless markets. Somewhere, a merchant grumbles that the tolls are too high, proof that inflation, like dust, has always been with us. One curious thing, Rome didn't just build roads, it built stations. Every 20 miles or so, there was a mansio, a kind of rest stop with stables, rooms, and a tavern. If you squint, you can almost see them glowing in the haze ahead. Whitewashed walls, smoke curling from chimneys, a horse drinking from a trough. Here, travelers traded stories as much as goods. A soldier returning from Britannia might share ale with a merchant from Egypt, both grinning over the same terrible stew. The humor of it all seeps through history. One inscription found near a roadside inn reads, "Traveler, don't stop here if you value sleep. The fleas are legion." Another warns, "Wine fine, food questionable, owner worse." Even 2,000 years ago, Yelp reviews were alive and well. But the traffic wasn't only economic. Imagine a procession of chained captives trudging south toward Rome after a rebellion, dusty, silent, their fate sealed by the same road that once carried their armies. A day later, senators might glide along it in gilded carriages to attend a festival. The contrast is dizzying. These roads didn't care who walked them, conqueror or conquered, rich or ragged, they all wore the same dust. At a crossroads ahead stands a small altar to Mercury, patron of travelers. Offerings of coins and withered laurel leaves rest on its stone lip. A woman pauses, murmuring a prayer before setting off again. The idea of safety, of connection between the human and the divine was woven into the roads themselves. To journey was to risk, and to risk was to live under the gods' watchful gaze. And yet, behind the divine facade lay bureaucracy. Every road had a curator, an official responsible for repairs, tolls, and maintenance. Records survive of senators grumbling about potholes as if posting on ancient Twitter. The Appian is a disgrace. Funding debates stretched across scrolls of ink, proving that even the greatest empire needed public works committees and endless complaints. Scholars still argue how free travel really was. Some believe ordinary citizens could wander without restriction, while others point to checkpoints and toll stations where soldiers demanded papers or tribute. The truth probably changed with each reign. Under kind emperors, roads united. Under tyrants, they confined. Freedom of movement, it turns out, was as political as it was practical. Still, the sheer scale stuns you. Nearly 250,000 miles of Roman roads once laced the empire, 50,000 of them paved in stone. From Hadrian's Wall to Alexandria, from the Alps to the Sahara's edge, each line was a thread in a colossal web of order. You could travel from Spain to Syria without ever leaving Rome's touch. That idea, an empire so large yet so connected, remains almost unthinkable even today. You kneel and run your fingers across the stones, warm now under the late sun. Tiny ruts mark the passage of thousands of wheels, like fingerprints of history. Somewhere ahead, a trumpet sounds, the distant call of another patrol, another shipment, another century moving forward. You rise, brushing dust from your palms. The road stretches ahead, quiet, timeless, patient. And though the empire that built it has crumbled into myth, the road still remembers. It remembers the footsteps of ambition, the weight of empires, and the eternal rhythm of travelers passing, one after another, toward destinations they could only half imagine.
By now, you've followed the Roman road long enough to feel its heartbeat. That low, steady pulse of endurance that hums through the soles of your feet. Cities have risen, fallen, and rebuilt themselves on its back. Armies have thundered down it, and centuries later, farmers have led their donkeys over the same stones. What's astonishing isn't that the roads once existed, it's that they still do. 2,000 years later, they survive storms, earthquakes, and the awkward creativity of modern traffic engineers. So why did these roads outlast empires? The short answer is that Rome built them like it built everything, to impress eternity. But the longer answer is hidden beneath the dust and moss, in the stubborn marriage between human ambition and natural law. Take a knee beside the cracked edge of a Roman road today, and you'll see it, layer after layer, still doing its job. The top, summum dorsum, big flat paving stones, rests on the rudus, a crushed stone base, which in turn sits on the statumen, a layer of fist-sized rocks, all of it resting on compacted earth. Rain runs off through side ditches. Frost can't pry the layers apart. Time, it seems, just slides over the top. And yet, even the greatest builders needed luck. The Mediterranean's mild climate helped. No deep freezes, no monsoons, no endless cycle of thaw and crack like you'd find in northern Europe. In short, nature cooperated. And where it didn't, Roman engineers bullied it into submission. Swamps drained, mountains split, floodplains elevated. One surviving bridge in Spain still carries cars over arches set in place before the birth of Christ. Those masons didn't have steel or rebar, just geometry, gravity, and grit. There's also the Roman obsession with maintenance. Contrary to the myth, they didn't just build and forget. Every few years, inspectors walked the roads with chisels and wax tablets, noting where surfaces sank or drains clogged. Town councils were fined for neglect. Emperors even bragged about their road repairs on monuments. Augustus once claimed to have restored all the roads of Italy. Modesty, clearly, was not part of the curriculum. But not all the survival is Roman genius. Some of it's irony. When the empire collapsed, its successors found the roads too useful to abandon. Goths, Byzantines, Arabs, monks, merchants, they all kept walking. Medieval villages sprouted along the routes like moss along cracks, and over time, the old roads became the skeleton for new ones. Peel back the asphalt of modern Europe, and you'll often find Rome just under the surface, quietly carrying us into the future. That's not to say they didn't take a beating. Earthquakes shifted stones. Medieval farmers tore them up for building materials. Grass grew through cracks. By the Renaissance, poets were already sighing about the ghost of Rome's ways. But somehow, the ghosts refused to fade.
even when neglected, the foundations held, so deep, so well drained, so balanced that rainwater and erosion couldn't easily destroy them. There's a delightful scholarly argument about just how conscious this permanence was. Did Roman engineers intend to build for millennia, or were they just so thorough that longevity came by accident? Some historians think it was deliberate, that roads were propaganda in stone, proof that Roman order could outlive chaos. Others argue they were simply practical. Build it once, build it right, and you won't have to rebuild it. Either way, the effect was the same. What they created refused to die. You find yourself at a stretch of the Via Appia Antica just outside Rome. The air is thick with the scent of pine and heat-baked grass. Between the paving stones, tufts of green push upward, life threading through history. On either side, crumbling mausoleums stand watch, their marble faces worn smooth. A cyclist passes. You walk on, and without noticing when it happens, the ancient stones become asphalt. The air smells faintly of rubber and rain. A bus sighs past, its tires hissing along the same path once beaten by Roman sandals. The world has changed, yes, but the direction beneath your feet has not. The modern highway still follows the old via. This is the final echo of Rome, not marble ruins or triumphal arches, but continuity. Even when the empire's banners fell and its language fragmented into dozens of dialects, the roads remained. Towns grew where crossroads met. Rivers were bridged in the same places. The very pattern of Europe, its geography of connection, is Roman. Every highway, every railway, every GPS route tracing the most efficient line from A to B owes a quiet debt to those surveyors with their cords and gromas. Pause a moment. Cars blur by, horns honk, and a row of olive trees trembles in the wind beside a guardrail. It's oddly humbling. The Romans built their roads for wagons and infantry, never imagining 18-wheelers and electric scooters. Yet here we are, still moving in their footprints, still relying on their sense of distance and order. Civilization has changed its clothes, but it walks the same route to work. Take Britain, for example. The great Watling Street, which once carried legions toward Wales, now forms the spine of the modern A2 and A5 highways. The Via Domitia in France still guides the motorways between Nîmes and Spain. The Via Egnatia, the road that once connected the Adriatic to Byzantium, still threads through the Balkans, renamed, repaved, but loyal to its bones. Even satellite maps can't help but honor the Roman line. It's as if the earth itself remembers where it was first persuaded to stay straight. There's a funny kind of poetry in that. You live in an age of fiber optics and cloud storage, yet your world still runs on a layout drawn by men with chisels and patience. The Romans may not have invented the internet, but they built its first metaphor, a network that made the vast seem intimate, the distant reachable, the impossible ordinary. And yet, not all of what they left is physical. Their roads carried more than goods. They carried culture. Along them moved languages, religions, recipes, rumors. Christianity itself spread faster on Roman roads than any missionary could have dreamed. Latin evolved as it traveled, softening into Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese. Empires may have borders, but roads don't respect them. They teach the world to mix. You stop by a modern milestone, a steel sign half covered in ivy, pointing to Rome. The arrow feels almost like a wink. 2 millennia later, every traveler is still being gently reminded of where the center used to be. Archaeologists sometimes call Roman roads fossilized motion. It's a perfect phrase, the past caught mid-step, preserved by its own ambition. And though scholars debate which routes were truly Roman or how precise their alignment was, none deny their legacy. The straightness, the method, the sense of permanence, all of it shaped not just geography, but psychology. To build a straight road is to declare that the world can be ordered, that progress can be drawn as a line. But the road's truest secret might be simpler. It was never about the stones. It was about faith. Faith that effort could outlast mortality, that something made by human hands could resist chaos. That's why when you stand here and listen to the hum of modern life, you can almost feel them beneath the noise. The surveyors, the soldiers, the merchants, the gods of travel, all still walking, invisible, steady, forward. You take a deep breath. The air tastes faintly metallic, like the echo of rain on ancient iron. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolls over the hills. You imagine it as the slow applause of time itself, approving of what still endures. And as twilight settles, you follow the curve of headlights tracing the ancient line, realizing that you are not walking into the past, you're walking with it. The stones, the asphalt, the gravel, they are all one long heartbeat, stretching from Appius Claudius's first hammer strike to your quiet footsteps tonight. Maybe that's the final wonder of the Roman road. Not that it survived, but that it still works. It still leads you somewhere, still promises arrival. And if you listen closely enough, every rumbling wheel and passing car seems to whisper the same old Latin prayer, iter fac and perge, make the journey and go on. And now, as the last of the day's light fades, let your imagination slow with the rhythm of the stones beneath your feet. The road stretches away into darkness, quiet and endless, a silver thread glinting under the moon. You can almost feel the warmth left behind by the bay, the ghosts of footsteps, the soft murmur of distant wagons fading into night. Take a moment to breathe, in through the nose, out through the mouth. Let the sound of history settle in your chest, steady, peaceful, ancient. The same air that once carried the scent of pine and wet limestone now carries the hush of evening. Above you, stars bloom where Roman gods once watched travelers from the sky. You're no longer rushing through centuries. You're standing still, the whole empire asleep around you. The stones are cool against the night air, and somewhere a small owl calls across the fields. Every worry of the modern world drifts away, carried off like dust down an old Roman ditch. Remember, those roads weren't built only for power or conquest. They were built for connection, for the idea that no distance is truly impossible to cross. And maybe that's what you've been walking all this time. Not just a story of stone and empire, but a path toward quiet understanding, toward rest. So close your eyes. The journey has brought you home again, safe, calm, and surrounded by the soft heartbeat of time itself.